Thank you very much, Mark, and thanks, Michael, as well for a very good presentation. I think the first thing I should do is to thank Mark, Lisa and their colleagues for organising this event. 9th time we've had this conference, so next year is going to be an even bigger year. And every year, pretty much, it's grown in the number of people that have been here. I'm really pleased to see this now stretching over 2 days and a really diverse, rich set of presentations about all sorts of different aspects of these problems, and I hope to add to that today. What I want to talk to you about is the growing affinity between fraud and cybercrime and the changes over the last 10 years. Because I want to make sure that we're equipped to tackle those problems with the skills and approach we need now, not the skills and approach that perhaps were appropriate 10 years ago. The truth is that fraud and cybercrime are now facts of life. The Home Office statistics up to the 12 months to the end of December last year show 42% of all crime in this country was fraud and cybercrime. And increasingly difficult to distinguish because with digitisation, a lot of fraud is perpetrated via computers. So is that cybercrime or is it fraud? We've seen a 12% increase in those figures in relation to fraud. Now, I think that's some cybercrime being reclassified as fraud, actually. When you look at the reports that we're very happy to provide you with, latest figures on the financial cost of fraud for 2019, we're publishing that at the end of June. But if you look in that document, you can see that since 2007, at that point, fraud was running as a total cost percentage of expenditure 4.6%. It's now up above 7%, 7.15%, a 56% increase in fraud. So these are facts of life, but we need to be properly equipped to tackle them. And my view is that fraud and cybercrime are gradually merging. They are no longer completely or as separate as they used to be. They're certainly not one phenomena yet either. But we need to be aware of that. So I want to talk to you about cybercrime and what we can do about it. The fact that it's a fact of life, really, the headlines are 2 presidential elections that have been hacked in the US and France. I don't think we say allegedly anymore. Investigations into elections in Hungary, Italy, Madagascar, and lots of other countries, and the impact that cybercrime has had on the political process. We saw the WannaCry ransomware virus lock up, in the last 2 years, we've seen that happen, lock up the systems of 61 NHS hospitals. As a former chief executive of the NHS Counter-Fraud Service, that's something that worries me particularly. But if you go beneath the headlines, in fact, it's even worse. Let's start off with cybercrime. 300,000 cars were stolen in 2002. That declined to 65,000 in 2013, but it's now back up above 85,000, and that's because of keyless entry. People hacking their way into cars. And then you start to think about actually driverless cars. You think about automated drones delivering parcels to people's homes. And you can imagine the potential for the next 10 years. If we look at the banks, there were incidents reported 6 weeks ago of people hacking into the second-factor authentication codes. You know, the codes that people send you via text message to authenticate it's you so you can make a payment. 4 weeks ago, something of particular concern to me because I've got a 16-year-old doing his GCSEs, somebody hacked into a school in the West Country and took the GCSE coursework hostage. Literally, they said they wouldn't release it unless a ransom was paid. And seeing as we're here today in a university is very much the most recent sector to be hit. The number of data breaches have doubled over the last 2 years. We had some publicity last month about a group of ethical hackers. They looked to see if they could actually penetrate the systems of 50 major universities, not this one included. They had 100% success in hacking their systems within 2 hours. So this is a reality. It's not individual incidents that we can just investigate and react to after they've happened. We have to think about what approach we need to tackle this problem, and that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. As well as my job here at Portsmouth, which I really value and very enthusiastic about, I head up forensic services for Crowe nationally. Crowe is one of the world's biggest accounting and business services companies. I've worked in this area for more than 25 years. And we help organisations do all sorts of things, effectively protect them against lots of bad things happening, but helping them to respond if bad things do happen. Also supporting litigation, contentious valuations, expert witness, due diligence. But today I want to talk to you about cybercrime and fraud. I'm lucky enough in my career, many of you will be setting off on your careers, to have worked to date with my team in 41 different countries. And we do a lot of work in the UK too. We value that work, obviously. But the next 3 months will see me working in Madagascar next week, then the Ivory Coast, and then Mali. So really that illustrates the growing need globally for the kind of specialist services that many of you in this room will be thinking about in terms of building your careers. The knowledge that you're accumulating actually will be of value to many people in many countries around the world. So today I want to talk about the nature of cybercrime, its extent, what you can do to help protect your organisation, what the latest research tells us, some of that conducted with Mark and Dr. Victoria Wang in this university, and then briefly talk about what might be the right approach to tackling cybercrime and fraud. The nature of cybercrime for individual organisations is low volume, high impact. You only need to be hit once for it to be devastating. We had a law firm from the Midlands, criminal defence law firm, come to us last year. They weren't pre-existing clients. They came to us 3.5 weeks after their systems had been frozen by ransomware. They'd paid the ransom 5 times, each time in the vain hope that somebody would decrypt their systems, free up their data. They couldn't make any payments. They couldn't receive any payments. They didn't actually know if very sensitive data about ongoing trials had been stolen before their systems were frozen. So potentially devastating. It was extremely difficult. We managed to get back about 85% of that data. We couldn't get back all of that data. They'd outsourced their IT systems cheaply, too cheaply in my view, and the system that was in place was that there was a real-time backup to their data. So as soon as the main systems were encrypted by the ransomware, the backup got encrypted too. So an illustration, if you like, you only need to be hit once for it to be devastating. In society as a whole, it's something that's very common and growing. I've quoted some of the latest statistics. But it is not possible to be secure. If there's only one thing I convince you of today, please don't imagine that some super high technology wonderful firewall will protect you from cybercrime. It won't. It's an arms race. It's possible to be as secure as possible, but it's not possible to be 100% secure. And that's because the problem is continuously changing and evolving, a bit like a medical virus. That's also why there's extremely low detection and prosecution rates. The latest statistics from the United States show less than 1% of cybercrime is effectively prosecuted. Criminal sanctions are extremely rare. So some of the normal solutions we perhaps would believe could be applied in this kind of area, it no longer is the case. We need to come up with a new approach. I'd like to take you through the kind of 3 main areas of cybercrime. First of all, phishing, which you may think you know about, but I think maybe in 5 minutes you think you won't. Then talk about ransomware, and then talk about some of the research we've conducted around the dark web, unique research about how the dark web is used to attack organisations and plan fraud and cybercrime. So most people knew about phishing as it was 10, 15 years ago, hundreds of thousands of emails being sent out in the hope that somebody, even a small percentage, would respond. But we now have spear phishing, so looking to phish particular individuals, focusing on their characteristics, their habits, and looking at how you could persuade them to click on the link, infect their computers. We have clone phishing, where previously legitimately sent emails are resent with different links. Again, you open it, in the busy business lives that we lead, very easy to make that mistake, you infect your computers. We have whaling. David Beckham's emails, I think, were put out the year before last into the public domain. That's because he was one of the celebrities, senior executives that people attack and try to whale. I think it was the lawyers to his PR firm in Spain that was hacked. We have link manipulation. So I bank with NatWest. Perhaps I shouldn't tell you that, but I bank with NatWest. If I wanted to go to their customer services webpage, I'll go to natwest.com/customer services. But if the link was manipulated, it would be sent to me as natwest.customerservices.com. And I'm then no longer clicking on the natwest.com domain, but on the customerservices.com domain. But it looks very similar. We have filter evasion to try and stop people actually getting the viruses too. They are put in pictures or videos designed to attract us because they are outrageous or make us angry or something we very strongly agree with. We have website forgery, where tiny little pictures are put over the actual URL that you are clicking on, so you think you're clicking on the correct URL. In fact, you're going to a completely different one. Covert redirect. The website is legitimate, but the pop-up isn't. All those irritating little pop-ups that we click and get rid of, we click on it, we infect our computers. Social engineering, looking at the kind of things that outrage people, make them angry, make them interested, and exploiting that. And phone phishing too. There is an app on the app site for Apple called SpoofCard, which you can download for $1.99. I'm not suggesting you do. $1.99, that can change your voice from that of a man to a woman or vice versa. It can actually even add background noise to pretend you are in a business environment, and it can spoof the number that rings you. So it may look like the right number for customer services from your bank. In fact, it's a completely different number. So phishing has moved on a bit. We then have ransomware. I talked about WannaCry and the encrypting ransomware, but non-encrypting ransomware, putting pornographic images on the screen of your computer. You can only get rid of them if you can actually pay the ransom. Requiring you to reload Windows 4 or 5 times a day, making it effectively impossible to use your computer. Leakware that actually focuses in on the personal folder. Most people have a C personal folder. They put their personal stuff in, steals that, and tries to extract a ransom for its return. Mobile ransomware, who's got an Apple iPhone? Okay, that's threatening to use the Find My Phone app on your Apple iPhone to actually delete all the data. And Androids, anybody? Yeah, that removes your capacity to stop some very nasty apps being loaded onto your phone. We've actually gone beyond the examples there. We've got NotPetya, Bad Rabbit, all sorts of other developments from those viruses. The people producing them actually even have virus reference numbers. So like with legitimate software, it might be 11.4.13. They even have virus numbers of this because they need to control what they're putting out there to make sure they're being effective in getting around our controls. Got an example here of clone phishing. This was an email that was sent to one of our clients. Looks legitimate until you actually look at the detail, and you can see that the domain is companyhousei.com. My team were tasked with actually finding where that came from, and it took a lot of hard work. It was by no means simple. We traced it. It was registered to someone in southeastern Fujian in China, and the link to post accounts goes to an address hosted in Germany behind a proxy service. This is the actual screen that came up on the NHS computers, which were locked by the WannaCry ransomware virus. And this, I think, illustrates my point about these people perpetrating cybercrime. These are sophisticated, rapidly growing businesses who are actually even thinking about client service. When you blow up what it said, you can decrypt some of your files for free. We will have free events for users who are so poor they couldn't pay in 6 months. So they're even trying to be client-friendly, to make it easy for people to make those payments. Yeah, these are not teenagers hacking in their bedrooms. It's not even mostly state actors. These are rapidly growing, highly profitable businesses. And of course, that virus spread across the world within 24 hours. We think it started with a Russian attack on the Ukrainian power grid, but the cyber criminals, once they realized that there was a state attack going on, piggybacked it for their own advantage, and it even then went back into Russia and infected many organizations back in Russia. The third aspect of cybercrime that I want to talk about is the dark web. And I'm really proud of the research we did with Portsmouth about the dark web. I think people knew about the dark web as something where individuals sought to buy drugs or sex or guns. But what they didn't know before that research was how it was being used to actually plan attacks on organisations. And as part of that research, we took the top 50 UK brands and we looked for any sign of discussions about perpetrating cybercrime or fraud against them. We found that in 21 out of 50 cases, and these were advanced discussions, including about monetising those attacks. So in 40% of the instances that we actually looked at, that was the extent of the planning going on the dark web. We looked at the big five markets out there: Dream Market, Tochka, Wall Street, Silk Road and Empire. And I'd like to give you a glimpse of the kind of things we found. So this is a screenshot taken from that research. Hundreds of thousands of UK bank account numbers and details for sale. I'm guessing that some of the banks there you've got accounts with. I know I certainly have, including passwords. And if you look at the top left corner, you can see the price of each bank account is $26. And that reflects the volume of supply of these things actually out there. Look at this one. Some of you may remember British Airways owning up to an attack at the end of August, early September last year. And I think they said they were hacked on the 27th of August, and they found it really quickly on the 3rd of September. This is actually taken from March last year. And what we have are air miles accounts, each of them with more than 100,000 air miles in them, resale value up to $700. And you can see that's on sale for $124, so a nice little profit for somebody there. Would you like a lifetime membership of Virgin TV? I mean, it even comes with a warranty. Can't be too bad, can it? And that's only $12.48. So those are things which are sold for direct profit, but then you have the enablers of other types of crime. So people offering to create custom UK utility bills, the kind of documents you need to set up bank accounts, benefit claims and companies. So you can see how the dark web doesn't just plan and profit from crime against organisations, but actually it's enabling a lot of other fraud and crime taking place. Again, where is the distinction between fraud and cybercrime? So there are copies of that report. I expect we'll have a bit of a run on them on the stall, the Crowe stall downstairs. Please do actually go and have a look and see if there's a copy left. We don't just like to outline a problem though, we like to provide a solution if we found a problem for people. So we have a low-cost subscription-based service literally to trawl the dark web for any evidence of those discussions taking place about particular organisations. We don't automate that, we use people who actually understand the dark web. It's something which very rapidly changes, so if you have an automated system, it is simply not as effective. And we've taken that further this year. We now have a capacity to literally scrape all of the data relating to compromised emails and passwords off the dark web. We take it off the dark web, we put it onto a very secure server, we can then index it, and we can search for compromised emails and passwords for sale relating to particular domains. So if we were doing that for Portsmouth, we'd look for port.ac.uk. We haven't done that, Mark, yet. Perhaps we should. We have done it for an awful lot of other organisations, though, and I would say we have yet to find a single one without really significant numbers of compromised emails for sale, even ones that are supposed to be very secure. One organisation had, that we looked at, 800 staff, 381 of those emails were actually out there for sale. So something to think about. So let's talk about what the research says about the latest factors to consider about vulnerability to cybercrime, because that's what everybody really wants to know. What's the size of the threat so you can have a proportionate response to it? Sorry, Michael. The first big factor that the research showed is very simple. how attractive is an organisation to cyber criminals? They're businesses, so they don't want to devote their time to something unless it's going to be profitable, unless it's going to bring them something that they can earn money from. So an attractive organisation might have lots of personal identity, address, financial data. We work with lots of pension schemes. Think about the data that pension schemes hold. Decades of personal data, bank accounts, dependents, address, employers, all of those kinds of things. Might be lots of sensitive information. We work with quite a few lawyers. Think of the sensitive information about ongoing civil and criminal cases. High value intellectual property. Some of the fastest growing entrepreneurial companies in this country. Is an organisation a gateway to other organisations? More and more companies actually outsource their IT to IT providers. Well, what the cyber criminals over the last 18 months have worked out, that it's much easier to hack the outsourced IT provider because you can get into all their clients rather than taking the time to hack each one individually. It's about business efficiency. They are businesses. Is an organisation known to have weak defences? Well, that obviously would make them attractive, but there's also the government Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus accreditation indicating that you have stronger defences, and I completely support those accreditations. The only problem is you then go on a public website saying you've got that level of protection. So then you become attractive because you're a challenge. The second major factor is actually found to be the damage that would be caused if a hack took place. So what's the strength of the public profile? How far do people have to fall? Let's think about a notional charity, one of the highest profile charities in the UK. If they were hacked, they would have a long way to fall. Let's think about, let's say, a secure government ministry like the Ministry of Defence. They would have a long way to fall in public estimation, a lot of reputational damage. It could be vulnerability of income sources, though, like the law firm I quoted to you earlier literally couldn't make or receive any payments. It could be the nature of the information to be obtained, and a lot of other people might be really cross with your organisation for allowing their details to be leaked out. It could be public expectation of an organisation being secure or a business being reliant on information services. I don't know how many of you read about the Equifax hack, which happened last year. Big company, big credit rating company, reliant on information technology. They were actually hacked, and the hackers were inside their systems choosing what data they wanted to steal for 2 months before they found it. That potentially is devastating for any organisation, and obviously financial damage too. So if you're looking at vulnerability to cybercrime and it was an equation, it would be attractiveness plus damage is the vulnerability, but then you have to deduct the extent to which people have proper protection in place. And I don't just mean cyber security. The language is changing from cyber security, that's the big technological walls that have failed so often, to cyber resilience, being as secure as possible, but also being able to manage an attack if it happens and recover and mitigate any damage. So the key factors there, something very hard to do, the first one, to map data, because you're always accumulating more data. So that process is never really finished. I won't even talk about the general data protection regulation, but suffice it to say, if you are hacked, you then suffer potentially a large fine as well. Penetration testing, just make sure it's a reliable person that does that. You can get accreditations on the web for $50 for somebody to do that. Also make sure they're bang up to date. If you talk to penetration testers, they tell you that if they stop doing what they do for 6 months, they can never catch up again with the speed of evolution of the threat. Are there arrangements in place to crisis manage? I regularly talk to the boards of big organisations, and I say to them, if a cybercrime attack started in your organisation tomorrow at 9 o'clock, who would get together and manage the problem? And usually they run out of the room screaming, I have to tell you. But that kind of crucial preparedness, game playing if you want, is key. And then you've got to think about managing the PR and actually mitigating the Information Commissioner's response. You've got to tell them about the breach in 72 hours, and there's a way to tell them which will likely minimise your fine, and there's a way to tell them which will maximise it. So the full equation would be your vulnerability equals your attractiveness plus damage minus cybersecurity and resilience. And we've built that into a free cyber vulnerability scorecard tool. It's online at www.crowecybercrime.com. Please log on and have a look. It gives you a report indicating the extent of the problem, a rating, and also the detail of where you are vulnerable, what you need to do. So you need to think about pre-attack support and actually diagnosing the strength or weakness of your organization's protection and then strengthening it. But also think about post-attack support. If that attack happens, then what are you going to do? I think the right way to think about cybercrime is a bit like a clinical or a medical virus. You'd never expect not to get a cough and a cold in your lifetime, but you have to do as much as you can to minimize the number of times you catch one and its impact on your health. And that's the kind of mental place we need to be in around cybercrime. Again, the links to fraud are obvious. With digitization, the old manual approach to perpetrating fraud can be done on an industrial scale. That's one of the reasons we've got a 56% increase in fraud since the end of the noughties. And sometimes we get called in, we don't know whether it's cybercrime or fraud. You need those cybercrime skills to be able to determine which it is. One organisation recently had lost £350,000 in appropriate payments, not to real beneficiaries, but to the criminals, and they didn't know whether they'd been hacked or whether it was internal fraud. Unless you have those kinds of cybercrime skills, how can you determine which it is? And all of that kind of qualitative information about the nature of the problem, that's why we've got 42% of all crime is fraud and cybercrime. That's why the UK citizens are 2.5 times more likely to suffer fraud or cybercrime than any other type of crime. And if we look at individual organisations, I think this is again research done by Portsmouth for the government, 43% of organisations in 2018 suffered cyber breaches, up to 72% for the largest organisations. But even the smallest ones, that's with 5 staff or less, actually had 40% of them had cyber breaches. And everybody likes to know who's quickest at doing this. So this is a comparative test of cyber criminals, if you like. These are big cybercrime groups based in Russia, North Korea, China, and Iran. The cybercrime groups in Russia, frankly, leave the rest in their cyber dust. 18 minutes to break out from a single infected computer into the whole network on average. They looked at 30,000 hacks to actually get that data. And you can see 2 hours 20 in North Korea, 4 hours in China, 5 hours in Iran. So that's how quickly the bottom line is, 18 minutes to break out from a single computer into the wider network. Anybody tell me what that is a picture of? Thank you. And this one? And this one's a bit trickier. That's a picture of the CIA at Langley, Virginia. You can kind of tell because the tulips are planted in a perfectly straight lines, I think. But all of those organisations have been hacked in the last 3 years. And I think that makes my point. Even the most secure organisations on the planet have been hacked. We need to not just think about cybersecurity, but cyber resilience, how we manage an attack if it happens, and how we recover. If you are attractive enough, if your data is attractive enough, the investment in time and effort will be made by these cybercrime businesses to actually hack you successfully. So finally, some thoughts. To me, life is about continually moving on. Everything develops quicker and quicker. We need to change the way we think, the approaches we adopt, the skills we have, if we're going to be effective now, not in the same way as we were perhaps 10 years ago. The investigation and prosecution of individual instances of these problems, of course we do where we find them. But don't imagine there's any way of investigating or prosecuting our way out of this. In fact, the small scale of the work in that area, less than 1% detected and prosecuted around cybercrime in the States, that isn't something that deters people, it encourages them. We need to think more about skewing these cybercrime businesses' perceptions of where they can do this or the extent to which they can do this and be profitable. We need to think about what would make them avoiding organisations, because the costs of doing that would be greater, the benefits smaller, and the profitability would be reduced. And I know that's a new way of thinking about this, rather than looking at individuals and investigating, prosecuting, deterring, but they're not individuals. They are rapidly growing, highly profitable businesses, and we need to think, as they do, what would be bad for their businesses. So just to conclude, cybercrime and fraud, significant and growing problem, I think that's obvious. Very, very difficult to have all the specialist skills in-house. The complexity of this means that it's unlikely in-house somebody will have somebody with exactly the right skills to deal with this problem. Many organizations have either in-house a head of IT or rely on somebody in an outsourced company. Essentially, they are generalists. The number of times I've gone along and had to help organizations after they've been hacked and they say to me, well, Jim, we asked our head of IT and they said we were secure. Well, to be honest, what do you expect them to say? You spent lots of money paying them. You've given them lots of money for kit. What other answer are they going to give to your question when you come back to them and say, are we secure? Except yes. So you need individual assessment. In the same way as you have individual audits, independent audits of accounts, there needs to be more independent standard checking of the extent to which people are secure. I'm confident we can protect ourselves against these new merged threats, but we need to have the right approach, the right skills, and the right help. Thank you very much.